My name is Megan Gallagher, and my pronouns are she, her. And the title of my session is Core Recovery or Core Restoration for an Active Postpartum Recovery. So it's all about C-section recovery and how we can work with clients to help them through this major transition and surgery recovery to help them get back to an active lifestyle that they want.
And so give me a little teaser of, what your topic is going to, what are you going to cover? I don't want you to give it away, but just a little.
So we are going to talk a lot about the process of recovering from a C-section. So there's a multi-layered conversation there about lack of support postpartum, lack of things like postpartum pelvic floor recovery that we don't get in the United States, that is sort of mandatory in the United States or mandatory outside of the United States. So what I really like to do is kind of be able to offer clients the knowledge and the recovery strategy so that they can recover from this thing that's a major surgery that we don't treat like a major surgery. So we want to give them methodologies of using breath work and pelvic floor recovery strategies to help them first do the activities of daily life, which are like lifting your baby, getting out of bed, things we take for granted that are really, really, really hard when you're recovering from something like a C-section and you're not sleeping. So that's really what I want people to take away is kind of this whole 360 view of what this is like for people so that they can have some, empathetic viewpoint to be able to take a client who is in this major transition with not a ton of support. You get a 6-week checkup that says, hey, you're fine. And then don't lift anything over 5 pounds, but your baby is already like 9 to 10 pounds. So there's not a ton of really good, solid, evidence-based, here's what you can do to make yourself feel better and to feel like you can function in your body and do the things you need to do, even though you're in this major transition. So that's really what I want people to take away from it is one, that 360 kind of viewpoint of what it is like to be in this postpartum state, especially with a C-section. And then also to be able to give people these pathways to help them get back to activity.
So will they be taking away practical things that they can implement directly with people that they might be working with in this situation?
I did my training through this really great company called Pronatal Fitness, and they have a whole protocol for prenatal clients that we go through when we train pregnancy like it is the marathon that is. So we incorporate tons of strength training, tons of, a scaled up and then scaled down training strategy to help people prepare for this major, major physical marathon. Yeah. And then postpartum, we kind of do the same ramping up period where there's a long period of doing, breath work and learning how to breathe 360 degrees, pelvic floor reactivation, and kind of getting back in touch with all of these muscles and nerves that are damaged in the course of birth. So we are going to walk away with ways to implement those things for clients who are recovering from C-section or even just from the regular unmedicated birth, because there is a whole lot of pelvic floor and core there's diastasis recti, and there's lots of things that are going on that we don't support quite enough.
I'm really excited about that. I actually own a women's gym, so
Me too.
Something that will be really cool to hear, not necessarily because we don't really work one-on-one with clients, we have group classes, but it will be really great to have a perspective and have a little bit more knowledge and understanding of what people are coming back with after they have a baby. So looking forward to that.
I think coming back is I've come back twice and it is hard and then harder. I had a C-section surgery for my second son, and it was a multi-year back and forth, not linear scaled recovery that I was not prepared for. And I have the background of being a trainer and kind of knowing what to do, but there wasn't a ton of support and strategy in place to kind of get me there. So I feel like that's a huge gap for people, because a lot of times people want to get back to things like running or lifting weights or just being in class with other grownups because it's hard when you have a kid. So I want to make sure that our trainers and the people at the conference are able to walk away with ways to like create that level of inclusivity and bring people in and, you know, create access.
I actually had a woman in our gym who had a baby, and she had expressed this sort of, you know, leading up to having the baby, everybody was like, you look so strong. Look at you, you know, strong pregnant lady. And then she comes back and she's not feeling that way anymore, but we don't really see, it's like a big disconnect, I think, in our perspective of what she might be feeling like. And she still wants to feel strong, you know, but she's definitely not. So I think understanding more about what, you know, people feel like when they're coming back and what their bodies are dealing with will really help with just their mental wellness too, and how we can connect with people. Cool. One of the things I'm always interested in is what inspired you to want to present this topic, or what has kind of really led you to sort of being this expert in this topic?
Well, it's kind of multifaceted. So I kind of came into fitness like through the back door, the back way. Like I came in right after I had my first child because I was looking for community and friendship. We had just moved, so I did not have like a core group of friends, and I was just sort of in that weird transitional space where you've become a parent and you're like, my whole life is changing. So I started teaching Group X, then decided that I was going to get my PT with NASM. And then I had my second son and realized that there was just, I think that was like kind of the clicker moment where I was like, there is no support. Mm-hmm. There is nothing here for people to feel like a supported postpartum. And there's so much wrong with that whole picture. Like it, you know, when you realize what happens in every other country. And I do a lot of advocacy work on the side with this really great organization called Chamber of Mothers. And they work on the legislative side of things to try to get things like paid leave and parental leave and accessible childcare and things like that passed as federal law, and a major cultural change that we need in America. It's a real scene. So really inspired me to want to be able to do what I could to bridge that gap for people, because I could not function. And I'm like, we need community, we need access to care, we need people who are knowledgeable and who are actually trained to help people who are becoming parents, and not just, you know, telling people, oh, you need to bounce back after baby. Like that's so harmful. It's so horrible on so many levels. And I am the opposite of that. I'm like, give me evidence, give me science. Let's do this in a scaled, sustainable way. And let's say it is not 6 weeks to recovery. It's more like 2 to 3 years. So I really want to shift literally all of the postpartum paradigms that we are continually taught and, you know, we're continually absorbing, because it's literally doing no good and all harm. And I want to do the opposite.
Well, it sounds like you got into it the way a lot of people do, which is just by experiencing it and experiencing the lack of resources and wanting to be that person so that people don't feel the lack of support or information out there. So I think that's really awesome. Does that mean that you have similar information about prenatal, or are those two totally separate things? And would you see someone going through one versus another as two totally separate things?
They would be two totally separate things, because most of the ways that I would train a prenatal client are kind of on this mountain scale. So it is, you start, you know, if you're starting with a client in the first trimester, you're starting them sort of over here with kind of the basics, and then you're ramping them up for, you know, with HIIT training and all that stuff to get ready for the birth. And then you're scaling them back down again. It's almost just like marathon training, where you're really ramping up the miles and then you're ramping them back down again before a race. And then postpartum, it is such a varied and individual experience that I have I also teach small group classes at my studio, and we have kind of a loose framework for postpartum that we use, which is just focuses more on core recovery and ADLs, the activities of daily life. But everyone's experience is so different, also, especially if you have an unmedicated birth versus a C-section birth. And I have a real soft spot for the C-section birth because I had one and it was an emergency situation. So I was fully unprepared for having to deal with that kind of like, number one, trauma, number two, recovery, and like just having no clue about how I was going to be impacted by that. And then kind of living through it over the years of recovery was a real struggle. And I lost the thread of our question.
Prenatal versus postnatal, but yeah, no, you're great.
Yeah, it really
stuff,
is
though. Interesting.
different.
Yeah.
And then, you're preparing for this thing where you kind of have an end game in mind. Right?
That's ending with prenatal.
Right. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And then when you hit this postpartum period, you have no idea how you are going to deal. And there's so many variables. There's having to go back to work because some people have to go back. Some people are going back 2 weeks after they give birth, which is horrible and obscene. But America, and this is what we're dealing with right now. So there's so many variables that are impacting people's recoveries beyond the lack of support that we really have. Like I'm seeing people who are coming with postpartum injuries that are like 2 years old because they've never had the opportunity or the time or the access or the, myriad of support systems in place where they could work on their recoveries. Yep. So you're seeing injuries like, diastasis 3, 4, 5 years out, and you're helping people recover from that. So it's definitely not a one size fits all, especially if people are just dealing with injuries that they don't even know about, because that also happens a lot.
I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about it because you're not forced to go through any amount of training on these topics when you're getting a personal training certification, for example. It's briefly touched in some, additional conditions. Yeah. It's not something that you really have a deep dive on. So it's definitely a huge miss, particularly if you're working with anyone who's had a baby. So looking forward to it. Anything else that you want people to know about your topic, or anything you want them to know about you?
I'm just really, honestly, super jazzed that people are excited to hear about it and excited to be able to work with this kind of area of people, because it is so underserved, and pregnant people and people who have given birth make up such a large portion of our clientels. And it's sort of like, just in like the general culture, they're like, oh, well, welcome back. And there's nothing there that's helping them. And they might be having issues that they don't even know are issues because they've never been treated as such, or they've never been screened for something like that. So there's just so much that we can do that is in our scopes of practice that we can do to support people. And I'm just really excited to share that.
I mean, I think I always talk to my coaches about how a lot of times we are the first trainers people have ever had. So they are learning new things that we take for granted as our knowledge. They have absolutely no idea. And people who are even experiencing things like you're saying, if we had knowledge and we could help them through this, even identify things that are going wrong, that's a huge thing. That is a huge opportunity for us to be able to connect better with our members. So again, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited too.